Great. And now I will hand it over to Chair Boatwright.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am calling this public meeting to order at 4:34 p.m. In accordance with the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance regulations adopted pursuant to the Building Emissions Reduction and Disclosure Ordinance, Boston City Code Ordinances, Section 7-2.2, the BERDO Review Board will hold a virtual public meeting at 4:30 p.m. on September 8th to review the following topics in regards to the reduction of greenhouse gases from building energy production and consumption so as to promote the public health and welfare of Boston residents. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this public meeting online. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the BERDO Review Board, the public may access this call through telephone and video conferencing. For the record, I am Jessica Boatwright, Chair of the Board, and I will now conduct a roll call of the board members. Board members, please say your name in the order that they appear on the slide. Jessica Boatwright.
Stephen Ellis.
Lori Ferris.
Gail Lattimore.
Reginald Stovall.
Thank you. Staff will now introduce themselves.
Hi, Diana Vasquez, BERDO Review Board Manager. I think Hannah may be on a phone call.
Hi, everyone. Claudia Diaz Martinez, Policy and Equity Advisor.
Ziggy Chen, BERDO Review Board Assistant.
Great, thank you. Here's the agenda for today's meeting. We are going to start with a vote for one Pathway 2 building portfolio application. Then we'll have a discussion about the 2025 Equitable Emissions Investment Fund application round. We will then review the meeting minutes and hopefully approve them from last time. We will have some administrative updates and then we will adjourn.
Sorry, Chair. I see also Board Member Faruqi has joined. I don't know if he wants to say his name for the record.
Hello, apologies to be late. Yes, Hassan Faruqi here.
Thank you. So sorry. Now we'll hear some information about the building portfolio application that we're discussing tonight. So I will hand it over to Diana.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I'll do a quick overview of the building portfolio application for tonight. The building owner is Donato Pizzuti. If you scroll to the next slide. So this application was submitted through Pathway 2. The reason being there's one residential building that's located in a non-environmental justice population. We can see them on the maps when they come up. The building portfolio consists of 12 buildings in the neighborhood of Alston, Brighton, Beacon Hill, Fenway, and the North End. Applicant meets all of the eligibility criteria and staff deemed the application complete. Next slide. This is just a list of the 12 buildings or the 12 BERDO IDs. 2 of the buildings are in what we call campuses. That just means they're connected in some way. Maybe the metering is connected. And so there are 2 campuses, but 12 BERDO IDs total. And building use types include assembly, food sales and service, multifamily, and retail. All 12 buildings had a primary use of multifamily, but with the other building use types, their blended emission standard just was like slightly above the multifamily standard for 2025 through 2029 and 2030 through 2034. Oh, and 2035 through 2039. So for the first 3 compliance periods. And then here are the maps. So you'll see this is the environmental justice map. I believe all of the pins, except for that like blue greenish one around the north end, are located in environmental justice population. So that's the one building that sort of triggered the need for the Pathway 2. Next slide. This is their portfolio with the asthma prevalence map. Next slide. Their portfolio with the respiratory hazard map. And then finally, their portfolio with the urban heat island intensity map. And then in terms of staff comments, we reviewed the application, originally deemed it incomplete, partially because the maps all had the same pin color. So we asked that they redid it with the one building that's outside of an EJ population with different colored pin so that was more obvious and clear. And we also recommended adding more information in the submitted narrative. After those changes were complete, the applicant resubmitted and we deemed that application complete. And the applicant meets all of the eligibility criteria. Staff recommends approving with standard conditions. And now I'll hand it over to you, Chair Boatright.
Thank you. I will now, I'm about to hand it over to my fellow board members for questions, but I did want to see if there's any representative of this application that wants to introduce themselves for the record.
Hello, yes. This is Joseph Sylvie, and I have also Melissa Yee with me. We're both in the financial department of representing Donato Pizzuti in this matter.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm now going to go around and ask each board member to ask any questions that you may have. I just want to remind board members that this application has been reviewed by staff and they've deemed it complete, and that our questions just should focus on the requirements of the BERDO regulations, which I know we're always good at prioritizing, but just want to kind of center us on that. So my one question is I didn't see very much in the application about resident engagement in this process, and I just wanted to understand how tenants are engaged.
Well, I mean, at this time, I don't think that's something that we've really considered. I wasn't aware that that was something that was a I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I guess we were mostly focused from our steps and our stance on this and how we get prepared, and less so about the tenant side of things. I guess I'm curious. Are you referring to just like their perspectives on this and their anticipation of certain gas powered things being changed over to electric?
Yeah, we usually expect to see some reference to how information is going to be spread about.
Oh, you're saying in the
upgrades.
future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely have a lot of policies about how and the ways in which we notify our tenants of things, and making sure that we provide them with notice on everything. So at the moment, we adhere to those normal procedures of giving them notice of anything that needs to happen in their apartment of at least 24 hours, and communicating building wide adjustments to them as they are available. For larger projects, that's probably something we anticipate having to figure out when those projects come up. But for the time being, that's how we've operated, is providing tenants with 24 hours minimum notice of any work that needs to be done.
Thank you for that detail. I will hand it over to board member Ellis for any questions that he may have.
Thank you, Chair Boatright, and thank you, Joseph and Melissa, for joining us. Before I start with the two of you, I actually want to start with the city, because I think that this might be a moment where I am wondering how to effectively ensure that when reviewing applications, the EJ narrative is a bit more spruced up, so to speak. Because what I'm finding is that quite a few times these applications are coming before the board, and I really, really do not like to put, applicants through another process, due to the simple fact that the EJ narrative has not provided the level of content that we seem to be looking for. And so my first question to the city is, what is in the application that states what the applicants need to put within their EJ narrative? And the context here for the applicant here is that in their EJ narrative, they talked about mass save energy and energy efficiency and appliance upgrade, but that doesn't necessarily answer what I would think an EJ question would be asking. So forgive me, I was a bit surprised by that answer. And so I wanted to start with the city first to, if you can clarify, what do we ask the applicant specifically about what they need to include in their EJ narrative?
Yes, I can start. Sorry, I'm looking for um I can copy and paste the sort of language that we include. Um Essentially we ask sort of like your future planning, and I think in some cases maybe EJ narrative might be maybe a misnomer. Um it's sort of a precursor to the emission standard compliance plan. So how are you planning on making your plan, if that makes sense? Um, and so the narrative asks for any like, how are you thinking about this? How are you thinking about prioritizing? What are some common practices that you currently do? That sort of thing. And it's sort of like an exercise in it's like a pre-emission standards compliance plan, if that makes sense. Um, I think we've just been shorthanding it as the EJ narrative because it's under pathway 2, and so it's the sort of um, if you have the trigger to be, under pathway 2, it's when you complete the narrative. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. And how I've also interpreted that was the fact that we've asked these applicants to put together EJ maps, to take a look at your map and take a look at where your buildings are located and think about what sort of coordination and communication and engagement you will be thinking about or considering into the future, particularly as you stated, as a precursor to their equitable emissions or emissions and compliance plan, excuse me. And so I would like to push, not to push the department too much. I know y'all have a lot on your hands, and I think, this is one of those areas that I feel like it seems to be a bit of a roadblock for why, we ask the applicants to come back. And I'm going to do my best not to, try to push that here, but I'm going to pivot here for a moment, and hopefully, Joseph and Melissa, you're sort of recognizing the conversation that we're having right now. And do you feel like you're in a space to answer a little bit more than what you shared with Chair Boatwright thus far about your future engagement with respects to these environmental justice populations?
Well, I'll say that I don't think so. I think that in as far as our response to the environmental justice plans, that was something that we became familiar with during this process of applying, and so that hasn't been something that was previously on our radar. And because I my understanding is a lot of that stuff would come into play when you're actually getting down into the business of making larger changes. That isn't something that we have on the horizon currently. We're trying to do a lot of this more approachable things, such as trying to keep the buildings insulated and whatnot, and not looking at wide sweeping changes. I could be misunderstanding that, but no, at this time, I don't think we've done extensive work looking into how we would handle these things in respect to the environmental justice narratives.
Okay, thank you. I am going to pause for right now and turn it back over to you, Chair.
You. I think we can circle back to that question of the question that we're asking as well. And I'm glad that you raised that. And I think we should have some discussion about that, sort of in addition to possibly separate from this specific application. But
Happy to circle
I am,
back. Yeah, but
yeah,
we're on the same page on this one, but thank you.
yeah. Yeah, I am going to say I really appreciate you bringing that up. And our next meeting involves a lot of coordination, and we have some big decisions to make tonight. So um, I'm looking to staff to note that issue, but we may need to postpone it because of the equitable emissions fund discussion that we have to have today. So we'll sort of see how timing goes today. But it is a really important thing for us to address soon. And I am going to turn it over to Board Member Faruqi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate the prior discussion. I would agree with that. My question for the applicants first, I know you mentioned in the EJ narrative that you are considering or looking into how you can procure renewable energy for the buildings. Can you speak a little bit more about your approach there and what factors are being weighed in the decision?
Yeah, so I think solar panels was definitely something that was discussed early on as a possible sustainable energy source. And so, determining how much of our roof space is available for that, whether or not that would be reasonable or feasible given, surrounding structures and the climate of the Northeast, whether or not that would be a wise investment. And I know that some other options include like solar fields, you purchase a piece of land outside the city to put solar panels down. And so that was something that was discussed as well, but neither of those things have become, legitimate plans at this time, just sort of things that we are mulling over as potential options. But, a lot of our buildings are within the city, older buildings and whatnot, so it would be difficult to incorporate that, but it was something that was considered.
Great, thank you. In terms of the tenants in these buildings, are they all paying their own energy bills, or are any of the buildings master metered or otherwise paid for by you guys?
The majority of the buildings are definitely separately metered and the tenants pay the bills. There might be a few exceptions to that rule, but the vast majority are separately metered.
Okay, sounds good. Have you all been engaging with tenants to any degree about Boston Community Choice electricity, for example?
Do you know?
We have not, but we can.
Okay, great. I would highly recommend that. That would be, I think, helpful in the emissions reduction piece of that. And then I want to also return to the EJ narrative. I appreciate the maps that you showed. And speaking of those, when you're considering how to sequence which buildings are going to be retrofitted first, what kinds of factors are you considering in those decisions?
So I think a large part of that would be tenancy. If we have a building that has a lot of vacancy, that might be one that we consider prioritizing so as to disrupt the least amount of tenants. And then other than that, I think we would look at things like if we had bought like a boiler recently, or if the boiler in the building was up to be replaced at some point, it would kind of make sense to try to make those replacements and those upgrades in line with previously purchased stuff, becoming no longer useful. So I think those were the things that were being considered as far as the timing in which we were going to do some of these repairs.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. I think the environmental justice maps also provide some really helpful criteria that can be weighed in as a part of the decision making. Certainly not the entirety of it, but factors around the local air pollution and extreme heat vulnerability of the different neighborhoods can, I think, certainly support in helping flesh out that EJ narrative. So would support that. And that concludes all of my questions. So thank you, Madam Chair. I'll yield back.
Thank you. Board Member Ferris.
No additional questions for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Board Member Lattimore.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to echo the comments about the EJ narrative piece. I do also echo the comments that Member Ellis mentioned about, clarity for the board as well as the applicants on the EJ narrative requirements. And I think this board has approached it as wanting to see proponents, applicants, really educate their tenants as, major changes are happening in the building that potentially will affect the tenants significantly. And the transition from gas appliances to electric appliances is an example of that, which I understand is in this application, perhaps, unless I'm mistaken. So I think the EJ narrative is something that we need to, be clear on ourselves as review board members and make clear so that it's not just words to the applicants. So I would strongly support the comments previously made in that regard. And also have a question about you say in your application that it's not feasible to replace the gas furnaces. And I wondered, what that, can you describe why that is the case? Just curious about what that is. I think you said something about older buildings?
Yeah, so not necessarily not feasible ever, but at least not in the short term, just because of the way that those buildings are piped. It would take massive amounts of retrofitting throughout the building, not just the replacing of that boiler. The Our like head manager of the buildings, that's where this is coming from. He told us as much, that would be a huge undertaking to completely retrofit those buildings. And because some of them are older, and in the north end especially, where there's not much room to work and you're right next to other buildings. So those were some of the issues that he brought up as to whether or not those were things that could be done in the next 5 to 10 years. However, obviously we understand that the goal of BERDO is to become completely um, renewable energy, and that gas is not going to be compatible with that in 2050 or even earlier than 2050. So that's something that we're going to have to do at some point. But in the short term, that was something that was raised as being an issue.
Mhm. Okay. And do you have a roadmap to reducing your emissions? Meaning, have you done any, in addition to that type of thinking? You talked about solar. I think I read in the application about replacing all gas appliances with electric ones.
Mhm.
Is there is there a plan? Have you commissioned any plan, or is it more ad hoc that you've been looking at this?
It's a little bit more ad hoc. We're still kind of in the early stages of it, of trying to make sure that we're compliant, in the short term and then the long term. So the current measures that we're looking at, like the replacing of the trying to replace the gas appliances with electric appliances, is something that we felt was more doable in the short term. And that's why we've prioritized that, because it's something, because of the amount of buildings we have, we're regularly replacing appliances. So that's something that's pretty easily just folded into the normal course of business. Whereas the other stuff we are aware needs to get done, but that's something that's going to need more specific timelines. So I wouldn't say that we have a roadmap per se, but we are prioritizing some of this stuff that's a little bit more accessible to change over, and then planning to do some of the bigger stuff down the line.
Mm. And in terms of the work that you do, has the owner used or considered using women and minority business enterprises for the work? I heard I saw in the application about the building superintendent, or the person you just referenced, but has the owner, or would the owner consider using women and minority business enterprises for some of the work?
Yeah, I mean, most of our work is done. We have people on staff, so the majority of the work is done in-house. But obviously, for those bigger projects, we would need to go to outside vendors. And yeah, we would consider any vendors that could get the job done.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Stovall.
All right, I don't have any questions. Everybody's pretty much answered. Ask them. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Are there any remaining questions on the application before we move forward? I heard a hand. Oh, you moved on my screen. Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you. It's because my camera's probably going on and off multiple times. I'm jumping all over the place, but thank you. And thank you, Diana, for sharing the description. And I think this is, again, not wanting to belabor this point here, but I think this is where a confusion of calling something an EJ narrative, and if these are the terms and questions that we're asking for applicants to complete, I now slightly regret how many times the previous applicants have had to go through a much more extensive process, because in a way, we were positioning them for the last bullet point of preliminary plans and development towards their emission standard plan, and really trying to get at the point there of how they're engaging with their tenants and informing their tenants. And, I know you and I have talked about this before, like the goal of the building performance standard is really to allow for some level of flexibility. But I think that EJ narrative, I don't think we have the ability to change that terminology today, really needs to be looked at, as well as the questions that are being asked, because there's not much about the EJ component. It's really about energy justice. I think that that's some aspects of it a little bit, but really about, what have you done so far? That's really what this question is. What have you done so far to get to this point? And I do think that this applicant has done their job to answer that. However, we are, in my opinion, or at least I can speak for myself, very much interested in what they're doing to engage the residents of multifamily housing. Those are the populations that I feel like are probably going to be missing out on understanding what is happening in their buildings and how are they being prioritized over non-EJ locations. So I would say that, and I'll pause and turn it back over to chair, but I think I'm ready to make a motion with the condition that, I would like for the applicant to come back with a response regarding how they intend to engage their residents, or even how they do it today and how they think about engaging them in the future. But for right now, I'm not sure that I would want to hold them to a meeting because the actual question doesn't go as far as what I would like it to go for EJ. So I'll stand there. I'll turn it back over.
I second that motion.
So, and just to clarify, my understanding is that we can do this as it's sort of it's a recommendation about when they meet the standard conditions for reporting and the kinds of information they come back with us for. Is that correct? I know we've worded it that way in the past.
Yeah, I can jump in. And also this feedback is super helpful, I think, for staff. I think EJ narrative might have been a misnomer that we just used during the when we were drafting the regulations that I think in retrospect may have been more of a disservice. So yes, definitely we viewed the narrative as sort of a for building owners who have not thought about this long-term planning before, sort of your where are you starting at, some a little bit of pre-homework before your emission standard compliance plan that's due in 2 years. And then I think something that's been done by the board in the past, which I think we can also do here, is sort of have a formal request that when this emission standard compliance plan is submitted to include certain information. So for example, when the city of Boston's portfolio was approved, the board asked to see certain information in that emission standard compliance plan that really highlighted like I believe it was like hiring practices around building decarb like plans in the future. So that was a route that's been taken, if that seems appropriate. Really, this sort of was thinking like there are going to be a lot of building owners who have not thought about this long term yet, and so how do we sort of kickstart that thinking? And then in 2 years have a more solid plan, which is the emission standard compliance plan. So I know the names all sound the same, so I apologize. And yes, and I think this feedback is very helpful for us at the staff to hear and see maybe how we've been communicating that information.
I do think that I think this was a good moment to check in. I'm not ready. I think the board now has information about how to better do a more accurate job of judging the materials that are submitted against the information that's been requested. I would like to have a conversation though with the board about it to the extent that we are able to make any adjustments. It does seem to me like part of why we talk about environmental justice is a combination of ways in which certain communities have been neglected or have had many things put in their community that were deemed undesirable in other communities. But it's also about communities that have historically had things done to them instead of done with them. And so I'm not ready to give up that even at application time, there may be some information that that we could be asking for in order to fulfill the sort of purpose of why this board has the composition that it is and has been given the charge that it has. So I would propose that we, you know, make a motion for this owner, and we go into any conversations between now and when we can have that conversation based on what we know about what people are currently applying with, but that we perhaps explore if there are specific pieces of information that the board feels it needs to sort of carry out its duties, can we make adjustments like now, sort of midstream? Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And hopefully it's not being interpreted that I'm trying to get away from, the EJ component. I think what I would like to see, okay, I see you're not shaking your head. Perfect. So I'm in
Not at
agreement with
all.
you, but okay, but I think I'm still going to set this sort of special condition because it is an opportunity for the applicant to think about how they are engaging with those wealth of properties that are existing within EJ locations. So for me, I make a motion to approve, their application with the special condition that they come back with a narrative that would just be attached to, the existing application as is, that talks about their plans for consideration. Because I've heard them talk a little bit about it, but I think I want to give them an opportunity, to at least have a second to breathe and say, okay, let's write this part in because they did not know. So motion to approve this application with the special condition that they write a little bit more about their plans to engage and inform their tenants of the work that they're planning to do with respects to BERDO and decarbonization.
I second it.
May I ask a clarifying question? Sorry, not to stop the momentum. Um, Board Member Ellis, do you mean like a written response, or would you like
Yes.
applicants to come back? Okay, a written response.
Yes,
Understood.
please. Thank you.
Okay, so and part of my question was, is that it is a special condition, right? That sort of fits the definition of a special condition.
Yes, I think that should be
Okay.
fine.
Okay. All right, so there's a motion on the floor to approve this this compliance plan with a special condition that the applicant come back with more details about I said it wrong. I'm going to ask Board Member Ellis to restate the motion, and then I will ask for a roll call.
Not a problem. That's not, I think you were doing great, Chair. I just needed to pause for a second because normally, Diane, I think, do we need to check with the applicant if they are comfortable with this direction that we're heading in?
Yes, I think that should be a quick check with Joseph.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay, I heard the yep. So, all right, motion to approve this application with the special condition that the applicant return with a written narrative regarding their ability and their, excuse me, now I've lost my page because I've written it. Motion to approve this application with the special condition that the applicant come back with any preliminary plans to inform and engage tenants on developments to reduce and decarbonize their emissions in their EJ communities.
I second it.
Thank you. Seconded by Board Member Stovall. I'm going to ask for roll call and how people vote in favor, opposed, or abstain. I vote in favor. Board Member Ellis.
In favor.
Board Member Faruqi.
In favor.
Board Member Ferris.
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore.
Abstain.
And Board Member Stovall.
In favor.
All right, so the motion passes, the ayes have it. Donato Pizzuti is invited. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. So we will, staff will coordinate for a follow-up as requested in the motion. But the plan is approved in body. So per the regulation, the Environment Department will send a copy of the written decision letter within 7 days. So now we are going to move on to our next agenda item, acknowledging that we brought up some important questions and issues, and also that in order to to try to stay on track with our funding schedule, which other programs are dependent upon, as well as organizations being dependent upon, we're going to move into a discussion and update on the 2025 Equitable Emissions Investment Fund application round. So our goal for tonight is to vote on inviting 5 finalists for this year's application cycle to the Equitable Emissions Fund. And the 5 finalists that are at the top of our list and our scores will be invited to present at our next hearing later in September. So before we jump into discussion, staff will review this year's applications. So I will give it back to the staff team.
Thank you, Chair. And then maybe right just before I jump into this, I want to take note. I did hear a request to add more clarity and maybe a stronger question around tenant engagement, resident engagement in the narrative section. So I think at a future meeting, I think we can percolate on what that looks like, and then maybe we can present that to the board and see if that sort of aligns better. But I think that was very helpful. And now we will get into, okay, great, I see a thumbs up. And now we will review this year's applications for the Equitable Emissions Investment Fund. Next slide, please. So I just want to do a quick sort of like high level overview. Just as a reminder of what the board voted for earlier this year. So the board is granting $750,000 this application round, with a preference to make 4 awards not exceeding $250,000 each, depending on the applicant amount. Nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply this round, so it must be a registered 501c3 organization or an organization with a partnered with a fiscal sponsor. And then in terms of the types of projects that are eligible, the project must have a public purpose. So reducing emissions is the public purpose in terms of BERDO, but any sort of, co-benefit as well. There must be an emissions reduction or mitigation piece, and then sort of environmental justice co-benefits. All right, next slide. And then just as a reminder of when these applications opened and closed. So, our poor applicants have been very patient with us as we've been trying to get this process through our internal legal team. But applications opened on March 31st and applications closed on May 30th. And we held 2 information sessions in between. Okay, great. Next slide. So in total, we received 22 applications, 14 were deemed eligible. Of the applicants, 9 were affordable housing / community development organizations. We had 2 youth organizations, 1 hospital, 1 homeless shelter, and 1 climate nonprofit organization. And then each board member should have a copy of the application, so you should just be able to see all of the information that they submitted. That included a budget, an emissions reduction template, and their project proposal. Next slide. Just a reminder of what is written in the evaluation form. So these are sort of the criteria that the board uses to evaluate projects. Next slide. Here is a very, very high level overview of the 14 applicants, amount requested, project type, and sort of the primary beneficiaries is what we're calling them. Obviously, there's a greater public purpose that is reducing emissions, improving air quality. But these folks are sort of the folks who would feel the immediate benefits from these projects. Next slide. We broke it down a little bit by project type. So there were 5 applicants who submitted a solar project. There were 5 applicants who submitted sort of making upgrades into their buildings. 3 applicants who submitted deep energy retrofit program or projects, and then 1 applicant who applied to sort of bolster a program or service that they're already delivering. And as folks may remember, during the last meeting, there was a sort of point of information that was requested regarding federal solar tax credits. So just want to do a very, very quick overarching overview of what the situation is or what the current situation is. So the big beautiful bill act sort of rolls back some federal tax credits that are related to renewable energy, but there are some safe harbor deadlines or safe harbor dates that are important for these nonprofit organizations who are interested in procuring renewable energy. So just as a table setting, a safe harbor is a rule that's established by the IRS that allows a solar project, but really a renewable energy project that has established construction to lock in its tax credit under the current tax law. So it's just to ensure that if you've made plans using your current tax law, that because the law changes on your plans, you no longer miss that money. And so there are some safe harbor deadlines coming up. Um, the best case scenario, if you're a nonprofit looking to install solar, is that you want to start your project before the end of this year. If you start your project before the end of this year, your tax credits are locked in. You get the money. Like it's gonna happen. Um, there is a second opportunity that starts if you get your solar project started by July 4th of 2026, so next year. You can still get the money, but then there are more rules that you have to comply with that are called the prohibited foreign entity rules. Essentially, you have to ensure that no more than 60% of your project's equipments come from China, Iran, or North Korea. Um, we're not totally sure how this is going to look, but there's some legal scholars who are saying that this rule could be very far-reaching, and so it could make things a little bit more complicated because now you have to learn about your supply chain of your project, and it can get really complicated and it can get really expensive. So really the best case scenario, if you're a nonprofit looking to receive a sort of tax credit on renewable energy, is to start your construction before the end of 2025. Next slide. This is just a summary table of the emissions that were submitted, or sorry, the projected emissions that are going to be saved or reduced as a result of the projects by applicants. So the first column after the name is projected emissions reduced after 1 year. The column after that is the projected emissions reduced per dollar after 1 year. The column after that is projected emissions reduced after 10 years. And then the last column is projected emissions reduced per dollar after 10 years. So sort of giving your short-term and longer-term view. And the next slide is just a reminder that all of the applicants had to use our same template. So they all had to use the same emissions factors for their projected emissions reduced so that they could at least be compared equitably, or compared to each other. That being said, we did not, confirm whether their like estimates of what the amount of energy that's going to be saved was accurate. We trust that their consultants were good at making those estimates. Next slide. We also have a geographic sort of representation, a visual representation, in case this is helpful for folks to see where these projects would take place. So each symbol, it represents an applicant who applied. If their application involved more than one building, you can see that there are multiple pins. Next slide yeah. So you can see, for example, Inquilinos Boricuas en Acción, each pin represents multiple addresses. And then Urban Edge Housing Corporation, they're included a deep energy retrofit, but it also, part of their DER included solar. Okay. So next steps. Next slide. Here is the timeline that staff is proposing. Today, we propose that the board votes on 5 finalists to invite and present at the next meeting. I put September 22nd because that's what we have scheduled currently. But it's been brought to our attention that it's actually Rosh Hashanah that day, or Rosh Hashanah starts that day. So we may propose moving that either to the following Monday or maybe that Thursday if that worked for board members. But the idea being we would invite those 5 to present at the following meeting. October 14th, we recommend the board votes on final awardees, so the 5 final awardees. Then we use the second half of October to make sure all of our ducks are in a row. We can get all the final approvals, and then by early November, send formal notifications with the grant awardees that they've been awarded. And just a little flag or a little note here, we've reached out to each of the applicants who cited some sort of federal tax credit in their application, especially if they had like solar in it, and asked them if they received a formal notification in November and maybe money dispersed in January, if they could still move forward with their project. All but one have gotten back to us, and they've said yes, that they can still move forward with that timeline in mind. So it seems that folks are still interested in moving forward, even if they don't get the money until January. But if they receive a formal notice by November, that they feel confident they can plan for that. Next slide. Great. Okay, so now the applications. Thank you all the board members for ranking individually. So here are the results in terms of, this is current 5, but this is actually 6. 6 finalists. So number 1 is Urban Edge Housing Corporation. It's received 4 votes total. Tied for number 1 is Roxbury Tenants of Harvard, that has also received 4 votes total. Number 3 is Alston Brighton Community Development Corporation. It's received three votes, and then sort of tied for 4th and 5th are Boston Medical Center, Morville House Apartments, and Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester. And I believe yes, and then I believe that's it, and I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Great. I think it would probably be easier if we went back to the slide, back one slide. All right. So I will now ask each board member if they have any questions or comments, and if anybody needs to look at a different slide, please ask, but I thought it might be easier to do this. Just want to remind folks that our charge today is to figure out which 5 we want to invite to present to us in person. So kind of be thinking about that grouping as we go through questions and comments. I have one question for the staff team, and which we may have gone over before, but can we award less than the requested amount? I'm thinking in terms of who we invite. We have $750,000, and math adds up differently depending on where the awards go. So how do we address that?
Yes. So that actually did happen last year. The board ended up awarding slightly less to one applicant because of just so that it could equal $750,000. This is possible. We just need to reach out to the applicant and confirm that they would still be interested if they were awarded less than what they asked, less than what they requested.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll just make a comment that both in my own read of the applications and also as I look at the ones that have come to the top of the list, my inclination would be to for the bottom half of the list to invite BMC and the Boys and Girls Club, because then I think we have a nice opportunity to look at a combination of housing and spaces, that projects that impact housing and housing costs, but have a slightly different focus. It seems it's a nice mix to be able to consider that. So that would be my leaning. I think this top list makes sense. I will pass it on to Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Boatwright. And sorry, I was just readjusting myself here because I did read the agenda ahead of time, and I am now realizing that the current finalists had been updated to the 6th. So this is helpful to see. I don't have much questions right now, and I might need you to come back to me, but I do want to just give a point of reminder regarding the funding amount of $750,000 for up to 4 projects. What we had discussed back in March was that two of those projects would be approved, March 24th to be very specific here. It was that two of the projects would be approved for $250,000 to allow for that remaining $250,000 to be potentially split for smaller projects. So I thus far can say that I like the list of applicants that I'm seeing before me because that does allow for that opportunity to come to fruition. But I'm going to yield my time so that I can read over the new list that I'm looking at and make sure if there's any questions that I need to know ahead of time that I can share them with the staff so that the applicants can be prepared to answer them. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Ellis. I did make a request that we add another finalist to the list because I wanted to make sure that board members saw sort of a broader spectrum of people's opinions. So there was a late breaking change to the agenda that some of the board members got. But I will turn it over to Board Member Fergie for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One question I have for staff, I know that there was conversation about rescheduling our subsequent meeting. Would any of that affect our ability to deliver a decision to our applicants by November?
That's a good question. I think if we have a second meeting in September, it should be fine. In fact, if the board votes to invite 5 panelists, that if we, for example, don't meet the 22nd and meet the following Monday, that could give the board, or sorry, that could give the applicants more time to prepare, for example. That being said, that then makes a meeting happen more frequently for the board, given that the second Monday in October is Indigenous Peoples Day, so we were going to recommend moving that to Tuesday. So there's a lot of like dates to consider, but I think it should be fine if we did it slightly later.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's helpful. And yeah, I'm happy to meet as soon as possible because I recognize there's a lot of urgency for our applicants here. I think these are all great projects. I was also impressed with one additional project, which was the, let me find the specific name, St. Helena's House, mostly because they offered both really significant emissions reductions on a 1-year time horizon and significant emissions reductions per dollar on both a 1-year and 10-year time horizon. But I think across the board, you know, as I'm evaluating the emissions reductions per dollar, I'm very curious to understand what kinds of labor costs all of our applicants are pricing into these estimates. And certainly I would be curious to hear from all of the applicants that we invite next meeting for, you know, more information about what exactly they plan to do in terms of their hiring practices, their use of different contractors and different contracting standards. So I'm sure we can communicate that. And I think the my final point is, you know, I agree with Chair Boatwright's comment about having a wider array of types of applicants, because I think, you know, I'm always curious to hear how different projects can work in different building use types. And so we have an opportunity to pilot some of that with our funding decisions. And I do particularly appreciate that we can fund a greater number of applicants with, you know, finalists 2, 5, and 6 here. So those are all the comments and questions I have for today, or for right now, and I'll yield back, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Thank you.
One clarifying point. The per dollar, to be clear, is per dollar that they're requesting from the fund. So it's not per dollar of their total project cost, but per dollar of what they're requesting, you know, in the application.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
So that metric is then amplified if they have fewer additional sources, just in terms of how we should evaluate it.
Yes. So the bigger the budget, yeah, I guess it sort of diminishes. Well, I don't want to say diminish. Some of these projects can be very expensive. But yeah, it sort of makes the number smaller overall.
Right. Everything is I mean, they all end up being relative numbers and tools for evaluation, but all right, Board Member Ferris.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, I'll pick up on that because that was one of the comments. This is my first year reviewing these, and I think one of my comments is that it's a little bit challenging to look apples to apples across the projects at those metrics of avoided emissions and avoided emissions per cost because the prediction of avoided emissions is based on such different levels of detail of information. For example, some have very comprehensive energy modeling done by highly trained technical experts, and some are based on kind of benchmarks. So I guess that was just an observation of mine that I think, as you said, to that they're kind of orders of magnitude and relative. They're not to not take them too literally. But I also agree that I really like the diversity of projects, and I appreciate the reminder of the commitment we made to fund some smaller projects, and I think that is reflected in these top these top projects here. I was wondering, since the sixth was added at the last minute, were there other submissions that received 2 votes?
Ziggy, please keep me honest here, but I don't believe so. Except maybe if someone voted for St. Helena's, because I think board members Faruqi, if we want to consider that a vote, that may bring St. Helena's in. Does that sound right, Ziggy?
No, that'll be the only vote for St. Helena's.
Oh, okay, I apologize. So no, this would be the only.
So that was my only question. I guess the rest was just commentary. Thank you.
And board member
Yeah.
Ferris, sorry, this not to interrupt, but just if you have thoughts about this, we are always looking for ways to improve this application process. So, maybe offline we can chat if you think there would be a better way of sort of quantifying these things.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, thanks. Apologies. I didn't hear a lot of the latter part of Member Faruqi and none of Member Ferris's comments because I was having some audio issues. So I had to come back in. So hopefully I won't freeze and you'll hear me. So thank you. It was really interesting reading all these applications, and Diana knows I sent a bunch of questions about them. And just trying to figure out, I guess my overarching question, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to prioritize these applications. You could prioritize them based on the need for those who are getting the solar tax credits be prioritized because of their deadlines. You can prioritize it based on the emissions reductions of emission reductions, the emission reductions by dollar amount, the cost effectiveness, the number of people impacted, geography, etc. It was hard for me as I looked at all those factors, to kind of make a choice, especially hearing tonight that the emissions reduction piece, it sounds like it's subjective as opposed to objective. So not sure, unless I got that wrong, Diana. Just something you said made me think that it was like, okay, do we know if those emission reduction figures are valid or objective? But in any case, a lot of different ways. So I guess my overarching question is the decision making for this review board based only on scoring, meaning how all of us have scored? I saw that there was another place in the applications, in the evaluation sheets, where it said editable, which I assume was give your own thoughts outside of what you scored. So, I mean, to be honest, the cut lines up with pretty much with how I scored my own application. So it's interesting to see how the collective has defined it or had scored it. And I also agree with what Member Faruqi said about, I was also intrigued by St. Helena's application, and was like, that one is interesting, but it didn't make my own scoring. So I guess that's my question: is this what is the approach for decision making for this review board? Is it solely based on our scoring, or are there, I assume because we're having this discussion, there are other approaches to decision making?
Yes, I can chime in. So yeah, I would say the scoring is one piece, but we did not want to make a sort of like arbitrary cutoff based on, points or scoring. Sort of as we discussed today, you could read something and score it, and then once you see you know, once you compare with other board members or once you compare by building types, for example, you could say like actually that kind of changes my sway or how I want to vote. So the scoring is certainly, I would say, like a foundational piece, and then you can you can add qualitative information and discussion. Um,
Okay, thank
does that
you.
make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That helps. And when you and I think that you looked a little quizzical when I said about the emissions reduction piece, and something about that you said made me think maybe I misinterpreted that. Yeah, that was somewhat subjective, but is that the case? Or because that's, I mean, for me, if the whole purpose of BERDO is to reduce emissions. So it's like, okay, let me look at that one. That's important. Obviously, I'm looking at the number of people for which the emissions are being reduced also. But yeah, did I get that right, or misinterpret what you said about, you know, how people calculated the emissions reduction?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of like a yes and. So we do make people or applicants use our emissions factors, so like the emissions factors that we use for BERDO reporting, for example, so that it matches sort of the emissions calculations that we make. But on the back end, sort of like what board member Ferris mentioned, some people base their calculations on modeling, some people base their calculations on you know, what their consultants say. So it what we can't really control is sort of how they are calculating their projected what would be reduced. And so we try to make it uniform, but it can be very challenging depending on the type of project and how they're modeling what their emissions, what they project that their the amount of emissions that will be saved.
Yeah, that. Thank you for that. That's helpful. That kind of changes a little bit of my approach to how I would, you know, evaluate the applications. But for me, I did try to look at who's high on emissions reduction and high on total number of people that are served. Kind of did that kind of a chart, a high-low chart. But in any case, that's just my comments. So I don't have any other comments or any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Stovall, do you have any questions or comments?
No, it's just the first time having to do it, and you know, a little bit confusing, but I kind of think I figured it out. The only thing that I basically was having problems with is basically the calculations and trying to figure out how true they really are. But I mean, at the end of the day, like some people said, someone mentioned that you know they had some help with professionals coming in, and like I said, I'm still kind of learning, and I'm still trying to do my best to learn it as I go. So um, there was one thing I did agree with, and that was the possibly splitting maybe some of the money between three other people because the projects were small and there were some that came in under a certain amount, and that was again 2 and 5 and 6 did look interesting to me. But that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm not going to go on too much more.
You.
I yield it back to the floor.
Oh, thanks. No. Um, I just want to make a recommendation in line with our previous conversation about things to be discussed. I think we should be sure when we look at the request for proposals next year that we talk about a little bit about how we can best be organized for evaluation. I think that maybe there are some ways we can think about criteria and or reporting that would make it a little bit more straightforward. It's a ton of information, and we got a lot of really great organizational tools this year. But I think we can you know continue to improve. So I am going to ask if there are additional comments and questions. Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Now I've had a moment to gather myself a little bit, to really look over my notes here for a moment. And a couple of things I just want to call out. I again appreciative of the way things sort of lined up here with respects to the financial requests that these applicants have made and the diversity of the projects. Some of the comments I've heard earlier about what we did last year, having sat on this board. We, in my opinion, were focused a little bit more, and I believe Board Member Ferris asked this question as well when we were launching this, but we were focused more on BERDO properties last year, and the secondary focus was on emissions. And I think for this time around, when we were sort of discussing like what should we focus on, it was hard to decide that with three new board members on here, and not trying to overstep and recommend what you should be focused on. I personally would admit that I look for a diversity of projects. I do find that, traditionally we're going to come across decarb and solar, which I believe is what we approved last year. I'm not sure if any of them were upgrade, but more so decarbs and solar projects were approved last year, where this time we have upgrades. One thing that I would like the board to consider, but not today with respects to the list that is in front of us, is programs and services are unique opportunities that are a bit different than the traditional decarb, solar, and upgrade. Well, not upgrade, I should say, because I'm glad to see that here. So I'm glad to see a new category really being considered for this. I want to second what Board Member Faruqi stated earlier. Some of these applicants here did not really fly up high on my list simply because I did not really see a good notation about labor considerations. And so I do hope that when they come to present, in a couple of weeks, that they really talk about what their labor considerations are going to look like. And second, if not least, sorry, just pulling up my note here, more so for the environment staff. Diana, thank you for, or Diana or Ziggy, thank you for putting together the sections where you communicated with the applicants about the inquiries. I would like to see those responses. I think the only two that are on here that were listed as a part of that inquiry are BMC and Moorville House. I would like to know what their responses are to that question that you had emailed them. So please inform them that we want to know where they stand with the solar retrofits and so solar credits, excuse me. Granted, you did say one, but you didn't name who it was, and that's okay. But I'm going to call out the name that I know that I have in my notes. And lastly, I just wanted to. I think nope. I'll leave that as is because I think it's already been overstated. So I now yield my time back to the floor. Thank you, Chair.
Your Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say thanks again. Thanks, I said it to Diana directly, but thanks to her publicly for putting the charts together, with the emissions reduction piece. For me, that was helpful, even as I'm understanding that there are different approaches that people took to calculating the emissions. But it was helpful to have in terms of doing my own final ranking. And then just a question about, I don't know if I saw an inquiry piece, so I didn't know what Member Ellis was referring to. Maybe I missed something. Was that part of the inside of the whole Google Drive for all of them? Maybe I just missed it.
I can respond. So there were certain applicants, not every single one of them, but there were a few applicants where there was an email exchange PDF letter that was placed into the folder that indicated that the environment staff had reached out to the applicant to ask them regarding their timeline, regarding their mostly regarding their timeline towards trying to essentially receive this money, as well as the timeline for what they're trying to receive with respect to the solar credits. But there were no response documents to those questions that the environment staff asked. So I'm essentially saying that I want those responses because that may impact how I view those applicants. And so those applicants that are on this list right now are BMC and Moorville. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I missed that. I saw where Diana made a comment about something related to solar in one of the applications, but I missed kind of that piece. So thank you, Member Ellis. I also had that comment about how we, somewhat related. I have a lot of sympathy for the solar applicants for sure, because they are, really in jeopardy. And so if, I almost was thinking, well, maybe I should just rate them all higher because of that, but personally. But I also wanted to understand how we're gonna, if we are going to, and it's related to your question, but maybe a little spin on it, Member Alice, which is how the city's going to assess any one who's relying on the solar tax credit, how we're going to assess their ability to meet the safe harbor deadline. I don't know if that's an angle on your question, Member Ellis, or a slight distinction, but that was one of the questions I had. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a point of clarification, my understanding was that for now, our assessment is based on the response that they gave back to the direct question.
As an
Can you
affordable
read the
housing
yeah?
developer, I'm always going to say yes. If you know,
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
you all know how affordable housing works. Okay.
Well, no, I think
lines.
I should clarify that when I recommended we talk a little bit more in next funding cycle, I was partially thinking about sort of organized information, and in my own practice, I think that there may be some technical components where staff could sort of provide some scoring to us or some assessment to us. That's but also the two things that the RFP did not let us assess as closely were readiness to proceed and sort of feasibility of the project. And as an affordable housing person, noting what Gail just mentioned, I do think next year it would be good to be able to score people on like how soon is the project going to be, what's the project timeline? I mean, we can decide how we want to evaluate that. Like maybe we want a mix of things that are going to happen over time. Maybe we want the money to be spent very quickly. But and a little bit more about sort of the relationship between the proposed team and the feasibility of the project. I think we got a lot of good responses, but we weren't able to evaluate on that. And I'd like to see us be able to evaluate on that a little bit more directly in the next cycle. So board member for D, you have an additional question?
I think at this point, my points have been made. I appreciate all the work that staff did. And I think I do also want to see information about specific applicants who are able to take advantage of the tax credits. And I certainly weigh strongly applicants like Alston Brighton CDC who are not getting funding that they had been counting on. So thank you. That's all. I yield back.
Board member Ellis.
Sorry, just want to seek a clarification, Chair, about, sort of what you were talking about, just for my own sake of knowledge. When you're talking about the projects themselves, forgive me, I thought I came across a few projects that made it clear, like where they are in the current stages of their project, meaning that they've already started and they just needed, the final push or final money to sort of complete them. And maybe that's not what you're referring to. I just wanted to, maybe I'm just missing a piece of language here about what you're seeking from the applicants themselves for the future.
So one is, and some of the information was in the proposals, but because of how the RFP was written, we couldn't score based on that. So like, as an example, I find it appealing that the Alston Brighton project is like, we're filling a specific gap in a project that is pretty close to completion. So we'll be able to both fill a need and also, celebrate the funds being expended and the change happening on a short timeline. As opposed to there are other projects where, because of where they are in their fundraise or because of the complexity of the project, it'll happen over a longer period of time. And in my opinion, we should discuss it, but in my opinion, it would be helpful if the board could, if we actually could evaluate the proposal on factors like time, sort of surety of the funds getting expended, and readiness of the team to execute on the project. I think a lot of teams did a great job in explaining that, and I'm sure that factored into how we read things, but it wasn't a specific scoreable criteria. And I think our evaluations will be stronger next year if that's part of the numeric score.
I see. I guess I get concerned because if the an applicant had come in because they wanted to conduct a study, I guess maybe I am seeing that that doesn't fit that model entirely, but that's not the case for everything. But I do understand what it's like a feasibility study, seeking money for a feasibility study might change how one looks at this. But I thank you for clarifying your answer there. I was just wanting to make sure I'm not missing something. So I
Yeah.
And
yield.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I just one reminder that and I recognize that there's a lot of information in these applications because a lot of these projects are kind of long-term projects and kind of complicated. But we could add, for example, as part of our summary, we could add like the timeline that they've included um, in the budget template that they submit. There's sort of like estimated start date and estimated end date. I will say, even just the three applicants who received, or the three awardees from last year, all of their timelines have been completely completely thrown off. So, I think you can estimate as much as you think you can, and then the reality shifts. So, but I think that could be something that like at least gives a better picture, and we can maybe highlight that more obviously. What their estimated start date is, for example. Or maybe it's not even start date, but maybe it's like stage. Like, are you currently undergoing this project? Are you just about to start, etc.
Board Member Lattimore.
Yeah, no, that gets to my point. Thank you, Diana, about like, affordable housing and housing development in general, its timeframes are, very much prone to being off. And due to nothing that sometimes is in anyone's control. But in any case, I just wondered about, looking at my notes to just recollect my thoughts. I can't read my handwriting. Looking at the solar tax credit properties, those that are relying on the solar tax credit to fund their work. If for some reason they miss the deadline for the safe harbor, my question is, what happens then? Are they able to, do the regulations allow them to hold that money until they come up with another strategy if we allocate BERDO equitable emission funds dollars to them? I just don't have a sense of like, knowing how affordable housing work. It's not something I hope happens, but it can happen that someone misses a deadline and therefore after they get awarded, and what is the rule, if any rules or regs around how long this money can be on the table. I know the city has timeframes for, like, for example, the CPA money. You have to spend it within a certain period of time. Yes, you can get an extension. But I'm just curious about that issue because the way this environment is going, who knows, with this safe harbor period, what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So last year we didn't put in a strict sort of, you must use the money within 2 years. I think it makes sense. CPAs is 2 years, I believe, but then you can ask for an extension. I think that seems appropriate. Seems like a nice standard, to be honest. If you can't spend the money in 2 years, like something clearly must be going wrong, and so it would be a good time to touch base. Um, I think if the board was in favor of that, we could make that part of the grant agreement that you must spend the money within 2 years.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd recommend if we make a decision like that, we think about what we mean by spending. Just because, to Board Member Lattimore's point, sometimes things get pushed out, and so we should decide sort of what are our priorities about expenditures. And because I think that some of the CPA rules are based on the CPA statutes also. So it would be good to just think about that a little bit and maybe even talk to their team a little bit about what some of the pluses and minuses have been. So so we have a decision to make, and I have heard I've heard two ideas coming out. One is to do sort of a balance of pick five, and the one that falls off the list is Morville House Apartments, in favor of having a mix of housing and non-housing buildings. And then the other is that I've heard the appeal of having some options to split up funds, which sort of brings a question of, can we include 2, 4, and 6 so that we have more to deliberate around.
Chair,
So yeah,
one more thought. If recognizing that it would add more time, I believe last year we had 5 presentations and we kind of came up on the 2 hours, but we also had some technical hiccups last year, so maybe we won't have that this year. We could, because there's 6 and there want to be 4 awards, we could invite 6 presenters if that felt like, you know, good to the board as well. Um, I just want to note that, you add one more presentation and a round of questions and answers, it may extend the meeting time for sure. But that is also a possibility.
so I'm gonna ask for a motion on one of those approaches, so that we can have some discussion about it. I think is probably the best way to get us there.
I'd moved to invite 6. I think that's what Diana's suggestion was, so that we have some room for kind of, hearing people out and then making decisions. So that's my motion. I do have a question too, but as appropriate. I don't know if this is the best time to ask it.
Okay. Well, maybe let's see if there's a second for that motion, and then we can do the question.
I second the motion.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor with a second. Board Member Lattimore, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, can you remind us, Diana, when does the city want the decision made? Is it at the September 22nd or whenever that date is going to be meeting, or is it later? So mhm.
The following meeting, so what I'm hoping will be October 14.
So will we have the opportunity to hear people first and then make a decision at the next meeting, or we will hear people and make a decision at the same meeting?
So at the September, what is technically September 22nd, but hopefully we'll move, the applicants will present. And then I think the board members can sort of percolate, use that information, ask any questions that you may have, and then sort of sit on that. And then at the following meeting in October, make a vote.
Thank you.
So are there other questions or discussion items related to the motion? Board Member Ellis.
Yeah, one recommendation, just in terms of time, I hope we can, be very clear about our time parameters now that there are 6 applicants. I'm in support of that. However, Diana, just to make your lives easier, or to clarify how we can make your lives easier, is the intention to have us, vote in person on the 14th, or do you want us to fill out a Google form to submit those our votes before the 14th?
So I would like to have a Google form before the 14th, if only because if there's a request to award less than what was requested, we can give us time to reach out to the applicants, make sure that they're okay with that, um, and keep moving forward, just to
Okay.
sort of make that more efficient.
Okay, so the Google form would be set up in a format that, because I just want to make sure that it's flexible enough that should a board member feel strongly about not wanting to do the split of the 250, despite, us sort of wanting to go in that direction, will there be flexibility? Because, I'm not saying that this would happen, but there is a world where 1, 3, and 4 are the ones that, the board may feel like we want to move in that direction, as opposed to 2 of those and 1 and two of the others, particularly 2, 5, and 6. So I just want to make sure that, or advise that you set up the Google form in a way that that's going to be clear that that's the intention. But I do hear you. You're saying that you will hopefully be able to set it up in a way that will allow for if we say the amount should be less than what they said. Okay, thank you. I think I was just repeating back what I thought I heard,
No,
but I'll leave it there. And yield my time back to the chair. Thank
yes, and I can add a clarifying point. We definitely wanted to leave it as open and flexible for the board because we know based on last year, um, if you put an amount, uh, more likely than not, applicants will ask for the maximum amount just because these projects tend to be very, very costly. They're very expensive. So if it turns out that the board was like, actually, three projects that are really, really strong all requested 250, and we think that makes sense, then I think we wanted to leave that open to be a way that the board could vote.
thank you, Diane.
Thank you. Board Member Faruqi?
Thank you. Yeah, just a point of clarification to staff. Are we able to, once again, share questions with you to communicate to the applicants? And okay, sounds good. Yeah, just so they can focus their presentation just on the things we're interested in and to further make the meeting efficient. Okay, thank you.
Board Member Lattimore?
Yes, I know there's a motion on the floor, but that was the question I was going to ask, what Member Faruqi just asked, and I've already sent questions, but if there are additional questions that I have, I should send them to you, right, Dan? For the 6 applicants, if we do 6, so maybe.
Correct. Yes. If you, I don't know if a week would be good, but maybe if there are 6, for example, if the motion on the board on the floor passes, if you could send questions by Monday, for example, I think that could give the applicants enough time to prepare their content.
Sounds fair. I've given you pretty much all my questions, but I might have one question for all of them, additional question. Thank you, and I'll get that to you soon.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other questions, so I'm gonna move for a vote on the motion, which is to invite all 6 of the applicants on this list to present at our next meeting. So I'm gonna do a roll call on that motion. So on the motion to approve inviting Urban Edge Housing Corporation, Roxbury Tenants of Harvard, Alston Brighton Community Development Corporation, Boston Medical Center Health System, Moorville House Apartments, and the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester to the 2nd September meeting to present as the Fund 2025 application cycle finalists. How do you vote? I vote in favor. Board Member Ellis?
In favor.
Board Member Faruqi?
In favor.
Board Member Ferris?
In favor.
Board Member Lattimore?
In favor.
Board Member Stovall?
In favor.
Great, the ayes have it. The motion passes, and staff will invite that group of applicants to our next meeting. Do we want to talk for just 1 minute? There's two proposals on the floor in terms of when we could have our next meeting. So one would be to do it. Just to clarify, the holiday starts kind of right when our meeting would end, but because we're inviting so many people to this meeting and we don't know who will be observing the holiday, just to make sure that we cover our bases to move it forward, we'll make it easiest for folks to attend, and we'll be able to give applicants just like an inch more time to prepare. So so the 2 proposals for meeting dates would either be the 25th, which is Thursday at our regular meeting time, 4:30, or the 29th, which is the following Monday. So it would be great to hear either 100% no's or yeses or preferences on either of those dates.
I would prefer, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's free flowing or I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I was thinking we could go a little free flowing in terms of just if folks have a very strong feeling one way or the other.
I see his son who is being orderly in his.
Yeah,
No,
Hassan was being orderly.
well, I can jump in on a free-flowing basis. I think that I would prefer the 29th personally.
I echo the same for the same reason I'm sure that Hassan, because we have a previous meeting on the 25th.
Okay. All right,
I'm also,
so yeah.
I'm also unavailable on the 25th.
Okay, so let us do our next meeting on the 29th. And it sounds like we probably should plan on some extra period of time as a cushion.
Maybe a little bit, but Ziggy and I purposefully did not schedule any other agenda items, so that
Okay.
it would just be the fund.
Great. Okay. All right. So, so our next meeting will be September 29th. And third on the meeting agenda is to approve the previous meeting's minutes, which is from August 25th. Are there any questions or comments regarding the meeting minutes? All right. Is there a motion to approve the August 25th minutes? Oh,
So moved.
Board Member Ellis.
Sorry, I was trying to get to raise my hand. I could have just unmuted. I was trying to be orderly, like Board Member Faruqi here. But this is just a random question in regards to meeting minutes. If I find that there is a record of a meeting minute that still has not approved on it, should I just send y'all an email?
Yeah, it's possible
Okay.
that we just forgot to update it.
Okay, no problem. Just making sure. That's all.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. I know Board Member Lattimore was about to.
I was just saying I move to.
I said.
Great. So on the motion to approve the meeting minutes, board members may vote in favor, oppose, or abstain. The board members who are not in attendance should abstain due to absence. That includes myself, Councilor Coletta Zapata, and Board Member Ferris. So those in favor of approving the meeting minutes, either say aye, or show your aye hand.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. And board members who are abstaining, raise a hand. Thank you. I think everyone is accounted for, so the ayes have it. The minutes are approved, and we can move on to administrative updates.
Hello. So first, the BERDO team has not received any new applications for flexibility measures. We have recently deemed one building portfolio application complete, and we're working to schedule them soon. And another building portfolio is also close to being complete, and then we'll share those applications soon with the board. The second comment period has closed for the proposed BERDO regulations update on September 2nd. We received one letter in response, and that letter did not result in any further changes to the regulations. The revised draft language we presented to the APCC on September 17th for a possible vote to be adopted. And then another reminder about BERDO Fest, and that the registration link can be found at boston.gov/BERDO Fest. So any building owners who are on this call, we recommend that you come. It's a free event, and it'll be on Thursday, October 23rd, and you'll be able to connect with different experts in decarbonization. It's going to be hosted at the Artists for Humanity in South Boston. And then also looking at our timeline, since the October 13th reward meeting falls on Indigenous Peoples Day, we are proposing to moving the meeting to the Tuesday. Is there any objections to this from the review board? Oh, Chair, you're muted.
Sorry, I can't see anybody's hands because I'm checking my calendar, but it looks like everyone is good for that date.
Awesome. So we'll make that change.
I'll just say that I'm tentative for the 13th, Ziggy, so can't promise right now.
Okay. The 14th, I'm sorry, that we're moving it to?
Yeah, to the Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can make it work. I know both Hassan and I have a Boston Green New Deal Coalition meeting, but I can make it work.
Great. So we'll make the change on our end. Thank you. And then just a reminder, the next review board meeting is now scheduled for September 29th to accommodate Rosh Hashanah. And that is all from me. Any questions from the board?
Just a comment that please let the board members know if there's any way we can help get the word out about BERDO Fest or be supportive in other ways.
Yep, we have some materials that we can share with the board if anyone wants to send anything out. Thank you.
Great, great.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I'm not sure if we've really covered BERDO Fest, but really it's primarily going to be a resource fair, so we'll have sort of the different stakeholders that are involved in building decarbonization, because something we've heard a lot from building owners is that they don't really know where to start, who to talk to. Um, so, oops, sorry, I just saw a message that I accidentally sent something privately when I meant to send it publicly. But so think renewable energy procurement, sort of different consultants, different vendors, HVAC, mass save, etc. So really meant to be a free event to help connect property managers, building owners, really the folks on the ground who have to comply with BERDO, with those people. So yes, if you have any, we can send you sort of what our language is so far, and any help in amplifying it, we would really appreciate it.
You, Board Member Ellis.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Diane and Ziggy, for those updates. I'm, as usual, curious about the status of our potential future board members, and I'm curious if you can share anything about that right now.
Oh, sure. Yes, we have 2 nominees that were submitted by community-based organizations. Um, we've received indication by SCBO that they want to submit, but they're just getting their ducks in a row. So we are saying we'll be flexible and let them get their ducks in a row, but we should have that soon. And should have those closed. And I think the plan right now is to try to get both nominees in at the same time so that we can try to be sort of a little streamlined, and get two board members onboarded at the same time.
And the
So-
non-CBO position?
Yes, so we're there. The plan is to sort of wait until we have the other nominee so that we can have.
Oh, so all
Sort of,
three, essentially.
oh, sorry, there are 2 seats, right?
Oh, I heard
Yeah.
you said 2 seats for CBOs. That's why, because I know there's one non-CBO based position as well.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that was confusing.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry,
Got it.
the two final nominations or appointments, we're trying to hopefully coordinate so that both can get approved at the same time, because the process can get complicated, so it feels efficient to try to do both at the same time. Oh, you're muted, but
My God. I thank you. I was just confused because I thought we had another CBO one on top of the non-CBO one. So, but it's just 2. Got it. Thank you. I'll yield.
Board Member Lattimore.
Yes, I mean, this may or may not be considered an administrative update, but or administrative question. I wanted to just double back to the discussion about the EJ narrative kind of piece and just understand how we're going to address that issue or discuss. And yeah, just want to understand that better. Is there a process time frame and what is?
I have a recommendation, which is that we give staff a little bit of time to bring together, you put it in chat, right? But like, so we can all look at it together, the current question we're asking and some clarification on what kind of flexibility we have to change questions since we're in the process. So if there's any, regulatory or other legal reason why we can't change questions, it would be good to know that. But assuming that there are some ways we can shift things, maybe either maybe in one of our October meetings we could discuss.
Thank you.
No, thanks for holding us accountable. All right, are there any other questions or comments? Great, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, you can say aye out loud or raise a hand. Aye.
All right.
Thank you. So the ayes have it, the motion passes. This meeting is adjourned at 6:12 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and special thanks to staff for all the work you did to get us ready for today.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
thank
good
you
night.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.